WP. Scientists find a suspended animation chamber with a human occupant in the Arctic. After reviving, they realize the person is ancient. After learning a modern language, the ancient explains that they are disappointed to see how much humanity has regressed technologically. His language sounded like none on Earth. A different flow and structure. Deploying sounds the bulk of humanity reserved for non-linguistic communication. The hiss that shoos cats from gardens. The tongue clicks of disappointment. Tisk tisk. The onomatopoeic boing a ball makes when it bounces. Along with many other strange sounds. But he was human. Alright. Down to the last hair follicle. Down to the last vocal cord. Down to his DNA. It was a shame we spent so much time trying to teach him English as we studied his body and genetic code. It was a shame it took us 2 weeks to realize what he was trying to say through his drawings, that his pod contained a device that learned languages much faster than he himself could. As soon as we understood, we flew him over to where the pod was being studied. On the other side of the country. He seemed nonplussed by our cars and airplanes. It took only a few hours of feeding the pod information before it could translate fluidly between us. And what was the first thing our advanced ancient said? Now that he could chat with the folks who'd discovered him. Buried in the Arctic ice? He shook his head sadly and lamented how far we have fallen from our former glory. We weren't systematic in our questions after that. We wanted to know what life had been like. What technologies humanity had developed and wielded in the time before history. We were like children interrogating the fireman who comes to visit their elementary classroom. Talking over one another. Hurling crude questions. Hardly waiting for the answer to one before launching into the next. Had his civilization wielded nuclear energy? How about other, more advanced forms of energy? And what about locomotion? Did they use cars? Planes? Spacecraft? Had they visited other planets? Other stars? Other galaxies? Each question he answered in the affirmative. Though he appeared more and more frustrated as the interrogation progressed. Like with each new question we were further demonstrating our primitivity. Like we were Neanderthals. Excitedly asking a modern if humanity had found better ways to defend against lions than hurling spears and stones. I was the one who had the bright idea to ask him why he had been in the chamber in the first place. Why had his people preserved him there? Was it so he could be an emissary from the past to the future? It must have been a malfunction. He said. I was meant to be one of the seeds. Spreading our species across the stars. I was meant to be launched. Alongside others. Into space. To travel for millennia. Before landing on a new, unpeopled world. But the rocketry must have failed. I must have lost my trajectory passing one of our moons. And fallen back to the planet. To be plunged into ice. While the others in my group continued on to the distant planet at which we were aimed. I can only assume you have lost all cultural memory of those pioneers and colonizers. Given how much else you have lost and forgotten. Did you say one of the moons? I asked. He nodded. But Earth only has one. Check out RCLB Hoss for more stories and novellas. A dozen scientists excitedly gathered around the man. Who had spent the last month receiving the best medical care and hospitality that money could buy. He was now seated comfortably. Reclining at a table. Clothed in a bathrobe. And sipping a drink. He was finally allowed and willing to talk to them. The cryo chamber he had come from had been analyzed and completely reverse engineered. They knew it contained materials and technology that far exceeded our own. Microchips. Electronics and coding so advanced and complex that a team of 1,000 people in an entire month's investigation had barely been able to understand it. Within the chamber were supplies, several parcels that had been defrosted and examined. It was a type of food. Origins unknown. But it contained perfect proportions of vitamins, minerals, and all other nutrition necessary for survival. As well as some substances no one could identify. People who volunteered to try it grew taller, stronger, and smarter by several degrees. And also reported that the taste was delicious. It was clear that understanding the secrets of this civilization would catapult man-made technology several millennia into the future. The scientists' questions had been decided by committee. The whole exchange was to be recorded by a dozen cameras. They had gone to every effort to make sure nothing was missed from this conversation. "Tell us about your society. What were your people capable of?" came the first question. The man talked at length about the technology he had known: teleportation travel, light-speed engines, nanotechnology, infinite energy sources, even limited time travel. The assembled scientists hung off every word, getting more and more excited by the sentence at the possibility of such feats of engineering not only being confirmed possible, but was now right there within their grasp. He continued to speak of planetary terraforming, mile-high buildings, space elevators, healing all illnesses, lifespans of hundreds of years, even resurrection from the dead. Finally the ancient man stopped talking and took another sip of tea. Absolute silence filled the room. And the next scientist, his voice breaking from excitement, asked, "Can you tell us exactly how they work? Can you help us build and create these things?" The man looked directly up into the scientist's eyes and gave a little laugh. "How they worked? I have no idea. I just cleaned the freezers." The woman was dressed in white. The cloth looked light like a feather. Shinbari had never seen such fabric. She was grabbing their coats and looking at it in disgust. She checked their breathing masks, their rucksacks, and what was inside. Disappointment was written all over her face. They spoke different languages. Together, they decided to bring her back to base. It had been a mission like any other. The previous Arctic base was getting old and needed to be refurbished. Instead, decision was taken to dismantle it and build a brand new one further, to make new measures and experiments. There. Nothing more. The first calculation came back wrong. Temperature spikes and tremors did not correspond with previous results. No explanation could be found for the discrepancies. Ahmed joked around that it was similar to a Morse code, a communication attempt. He spit his coffee when he realized he was right. The spikes and tremors could be tracked to a single origin: a cabin. Entering bore a risk. A shake could bring the ice down on them and sign the end of the expedition. But curiosity killed the cat. As the expression goes, Shinbari felt the tremors going up the ice walls and noticed they had been carved in an unnatural way. They withstood more pressure. Luckily for them, the shakes became stronger the further they went. Then they found the chamber. Carvings. Written sheets not made of paper. A glass pod containing the sleeping woman. A smooth grey surface served to operate the pod. They discovered that last part when Ahmed ran a finger along it and the panel opened. Now, they were opening the door to the home base and leading the woman inside. Her disappointment grew with every minute. "Go back to the cabin," said Ahmed to Shinbari. "Look at the carvings and see what you can find." With a flashlight and food, he returned. The written language was odd. He could almost make sense of it, as if only the letters had changed. But the rules of sentence building remained mostly the same. He made a conscious effort to not look at the carvings, as these were very clear. Yet he had no choice. Without a translator or any other hint in the room, only the carvings were left. From the left of the entrance, they went along the wall. The first was easy to understand. A man spoke to a computer, who replied back. Then the colors changed, and the discussion heated up. But the next carvings lost clarity. He saw a vortex, a flash, a planet, sleeping men, and every picture had a few words overhead. And one sentence was written beneath, repeated like a mantra, in an illumination. Shinbari understood that the words over the carvings were meant to carry the meaning of the picture underneath. But this was not only a story, it was a learning tool. He quickly put together the translations for computer, humans, peace and war, eating a snack with one hand and scribbling with the other. He started to make sense of the sheets he had found. And the first deduction filled him with awe and dread. Humanity had approached singularity. A state of technology so advanced that it fed itself. 1 month could bring more wonders than the entire human history. It was no planet on the wall, but an artificial construct surrounding a star and gathering its energy. The computers were eyes. So advanced they started to overtake the human brain, which brought conflict. Then, Shinbari translated the mantra. Is God the creator or the created? Shin. Come in. Crackled a voice on the radio. Shit. Folks. This is bad. It's worse. Come back to base. He raced his way back and came home panting and sweating. The woman was sitting in the middle of the refectory, surrounded by the entire staff. She had done the same as Shinbari, translating words one by one until she could communicate. I'm Eren, she said. Am I the only human you found in suspended animation? Yes, whispered a voice. Then we failed. Jido has won. Eren fell into silence. The scientist did not dare asking who Jido was. Except Shinbari. He's the computer carved on the wall. Right? Yes. You made sense of it? More or less. You created Jido but he outshone humanity, creating wonders so fast that you started to fear him. It brought some sort of conflict. Not quite. We did not fear Jido. We feared our end. Science came far enough to predict the heat death of the universe. We thought that with human and AIs alike, we could transcend this end and come further. But we never managed. Jido lacked the spark of human creativity and madness. We did not have his processing and calculating power. We should have worked together. Instead it created a rivalry. Not hostility. At least not at first. It was friendly race. So the carved vortex is the end of the universe. I don't know how long I slept, so I will not risk a guess on how long it will take. Alias led by Jido and humanity had a friendly race. Who could achieve singularity first? Rivalry to bolster each other and then pat ourselves on the back and congratulate each other on progress made. But then we remade the calculations and realized that the heat death was closer than expected. It should have brought us together. Instead, it created enmity. I can't say who first came up with the idea to sabotage the other, but it led to outright war. And we were losing. Our society turned solely around winning the race to singularity. So the solution we found was appropriately stupid. The explosion. Yes. We recreated a Big Bang. On a small scale. It would obliterate most AIs. But we suspected Jido might have a backup plan. The borders of the universe remained untouched. But it scrambled everything inside. Planets. Cities. Humans. Only a few, like me, were put on ice and stored safely in pods to withstand the end of the world. I suspect some came out sooner than me. But she took a long look at the scientists. They devolved. Jido didn't even have to act. The children forgot where they came from and offered it victory on a platter. Shinbari shook his head. We haven't found him. What? I said we haven't found Jido. Eren was dumbstruck, slowly understanding that humanity had regrown itself alone. Maybe you killed it. No. She said sadly. You don't kill Jido. But if he hasn't come out yet, then he's still sleeping too. She joined her hands and took a deep breath. Humans. The heat death of the universe is still coming. And Jido is still out there. But the eye is sleeping. Right? We have time. Eren smirked. You stumbled upon the single right cave in the Arctic. And you think it was due to luck? A cold shiver ran down the scientist's neck. No. I made certain someone would find me. Jido. Out there. Is a lot smarter than me. For all I know. He may already be awake. The heated room felt cold. The scientist had a hard time breathing. Humans versus machine consciousness. One will achieve singularity and transcend the end of all things to ascend into a new state of existence. If nobody does, the universe dies and a new blank page is turned. Sweat was running down Shinbari and Ahmed's faces. My friends, she said. The race is still on.